too. Like there's only like 2 appropriate Step Brothers quotes in the whole movie. So were you getting nervous? You're like, oh yeah, just like
Okay, we are coming back in live.
Cool.
All right, cool.
Stream is set to healthy, excellent, and we have a new member.
Hi everyone.
Hey,
all right, we got Cam.
And yeah, Camelia's here with us now, and she's gonna talk to us about, I don't know, the dreaded part of this race, the tough, what's so cool about Broken Arrow. We're gonna climb a ton, and how do you do that? Because these are the Sierra Nevadas after all. So let's see what Cam has to add to our toolbox here.
Yeah, so I really like what David touched on at the beginning of just time on feet is really important when you're factoring in climbing. And that being said, also this race obviously tracks people from all over the country, and not everyone has access to trails that climb a bunch. And so I want to kind of start off with maybe some workarounds of if you have either a daily schedule that doesn't allow you to get a ton of climbing, or live in an area where you don't have readily accessible vert. So some things that I do for my athletes who are kind of living in flatland places is some treadmill hiking. So sounds like gyms are opening back up a little bit, and I encourage kind of a combination of doing some vert on the treadmill. So sometimes like even just getting 15 minutes at like 15% grade, just really practicing getting that grind going, and almost keeping it at a pace where you're still able to walk, but you could also run at that pace. That's a really good workout. And then kind of advancing to doing like 2 sets of that kind of later in a training cycle is super helpful. So doing like 2 times 15 minutes, and then incorporating in like a run between sets, because you also need to practice getting that turnover and the active recovery on the trail. So that's been really helpful. And then also doing short hill reps. So I think that most people have access to even like a half-mile hill or a quarter-mile hill that gains, 100 feet or 50 feet. Just practicing, working those muscles and using that as kind of your speed work can be really helpful. So however long of a hill you have, just doing repeats on that, working with a coach, and just slowly increasing that. So you're not going straight to doing 30 minutes of hill work in a session, but you're starting at maybe 6 minutes, the next week getting in 10, kind of going up from there. And I also don't really prescribe hill workouts, like purposeful hill workouts every single week for my athletes. Training for Broken Arrow, it might be something like kind of at the peak weeks, you might do some consecutive hill work, but it's a stress on your body, and a lot of times just increasing your fitness in other ways and reducing stress can be helpful. Like some people need to drive, like today I drove like 45 minutes to get to a like steep hill to practice for a really specific race. But a lot of people don't have that flexibility with their schedule. You got kids, you have to be at work at 8 a.m. Like you have to manage what's going to be doable for your lifestyle. So you might get more benefit from getting to a track and doing speed workout that's going to increase your cardiovascular fitness just as much as getting to a hill. And so balancing, when is it important to really get those hill workouts in, and when is it more important to reduce the stress load? So like David said, like you're not going to be hammering every day or even every week. You've got to factor in some easier weeks. And then also just practicing like hiking. So I just did Western States at the end of June, which it starts in Squaw Valley, so the same area that Broken Arrow's in. And by the end of the race, I mean, I was just like, I just feel like I'm a professional walker because that's like really, if you're efficient on the uphills, you can really make up some time on people. So just really practice. Like you can walk uphill and be pretty out of breath. And for me, that's easier than trying to run up a really steep hill. So kind of just treat the hills as your playground of when you're most efficient, whether that's getting in some kind of jogging steps or hiking or a combination. And then also, I think that it's also a really good like mental challenge is to factor in the downhill. So a lot of people don't think about that, but running downhill can totally blow up your quads. So you also want to practice some meaningful downhill running and, you know, maybe purposefully do some speed work on the downhill so that you can practice that pounding on your quads. And also that transition from the uphill to the downhill. So like mentally, when I'm in race mode, I just practice, like when I get to the top of that climb, I'm just immediately going to switch to jogging. I'm not going to like stop and celebrate the top. So you might need to, and that's fine. But I think that mentally it's a really good edge just to be like, all right, I've gotten to the top, but this is my active recovery. I'm just going to keep moving forward. So those are kind of my biggest tips for hills, and just not getting discouraged if you live in a place where you don't have hills. It's not going to make or break your race, but just getting out the door and getting your cardiovascular fitness it's really going to do wonders for you. And also on that note, like with Western States starting in Squaw Valley, I always feel like terrible up at the start because you're starting at like 7,000 feet or 6,000 feet, and I even living at 3,000 feet in Bend, I still just can't get my breathing down as easily. And so even if you've been practicing like averaging 20-minute uphill miles, just know like when you're up at altitude, it might be a minute or two slower, and that's okay.
That's correct. It's not even, that's like the right thing to do.
Yeah, you should be going slower. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I love your point about don't worry if you don't have all these things like hill, you know, doing these hill things, it's like one piece of a giant puzzle, and it's great if you have it. It's like, well, cool, you live in somewhere hilly and awesome and whatever, but fitness is fitness. Like at the end of the day, being more fit is always helpful, and the other things you can learn over time. Like if it's your first hilly race, you know, you're probably going to learn some things in the middle of, you know, you're going to learn some things, but like, yeah, people from flat lands do really well at these kinds of races, you know, all the time.
Yeah, and I think that it's just a good reminder of you've just got to work with what you've got and use your strengths to your advantage. So
Yeah,
practicing all the other things that we're talking about today.
cool.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Lunges and squats are also, if you don't have a hill, just do a ton of lunges.
and also
Yeah.
and also like I think sometimes people cram for races too, myself included. Like I'm recovering from Western States and I'm already looking toward my next race that has a ton of vert, and I'm like, okay, I just need to do vert every day, and that's not the case. Like you're your own worst coach sometimes, because you know you can't just go from doing 500 feet of climbing a week to 5,000 and think that your body is going to just automatically adjust. So definitely also kind of keeping track, if you look at your Strava weekly stuff, like just take note of, okay, like maybe I shouldn't just jump up in climbing.
You see the bar graphs like this and you're like, oh, dang it.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, don't do a ton of lunges, do 5 lunges. And then the next day,
Just
6.
Just the right amount of lunges. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I guess I'm going to jump right in and hit our last, topic, our Broken Arrow specific topic, which I guess this one is probably right up there, unless you're in Colorado and then you're like, you guys, whatever, altitude, 6,000 feet. But yeah.
Really quick, if you do have any questions, we're answer
questions at the end, so drop them in the chat and I'll get them all ready.
Yeah, David will field the best ones. But yeah, so I mean, altitude's a big question mark probably for most people who don't happen to live in the Sierras or in the San Juans, whatever. You know, there's some places people live in altitude, most of us don't. And when I say altitude, really what I'm saying is above 6,000 feet, because that's more or less like the benchmark level where a lot of these physiological adaptations start to happen. So when people say altitude, they don't mean 4,000. It's crazy. Like you could say you could live at 4,000 feet and it's higher than 1,000 feet, but the stuff that we kind of care about, or the stuff that endurance athletes care about, 6,000 is like where it happens. So, I mean, Broken Arrow is right in the sweet spot, right? We start around 6,000 feet at Olympic Valley, and the top of the course is almost 9,000, not quite, but right. So this is a factor for all of our races. And so one thing that is a fact is it's just harder to run at these higher elevations and it's slower. And so like, why is that? And the basic idea is that there's less oxygen, which isn't really the case. It's that there's less pressure being put on the oxygen and it doesn't get into your blood as well. That's actually the more specific gist in a nutshell, is that you just can't get the oxygen that's in the air into your blood as well. So like you're not getting as much to the muscles to do this work. And so yeah, it's harder and slower to run in altitude. So I think one thing that's interesting is like, how much difference does it make? We feel the difference, right? So that's, that's one thing, but there's like quantitative ways to like look at it. And I went to one of my, preferred altitude converters, because these things exist. And you could say, okay, if I run 10 hours at the Broken Arrow 50K, what is that worth if I go down to sea level, or, to 1,000 to 3,000 feet? And it's literally an hour faster. So if you did the same race at Broken Arrow, 10-hour race at Broken Arrow is worth a 9-hour race at sea level, which is substantial. This is like 11, massive difference really. So it's just to say that you will go slower at Broken Arrow than other races, even if it's a very hilly race, like just because of the altitude, it's, bare minimum 10 to 12% slower. So this is something that's helpful to know, so you don't think, oh man, this was a bad race for me, or I can't believe I did such a slow race. Like that's just one of them, many factors, but that alone is huge. And there's not much you can do about it if you live at sea level. There's a bunch of things that are nuanced we won't get into, like altitude tents, and what about that? Does it work, or can I go to altitude before the race? We'll get into that.
Yeah, that's a whole can of worms.
Big can of worms. I'm not going to open it. I'm just saying there's lots of stuff you're going to hear, and probably a lot of it you're not going to do. So it's just going to be slower. Like that's what you can just know. And so what are some of the things that you're going to feel when you get up there? Like probably initially, if you show up within a few days of the race, like your heart rate is going to be higher. Your respiratory rate will be higher. Your appetite can be suppressed, which does kind of play into what Brett's talking about. At altitude, it can be harder to eat. Like you won't want to eat as much. Your gut won't function as well. And that's just part of what you're dealing with. And in general, you become more dehydrated, partially because your respiratory rate goes up, and probably some other things that I honestly couldn't tell you exactly, but you're going to be more dehydrated. So that's something that you can plan for. And it's not just like pound a bunch of water one day before the race. It's more like a long-term thing. Like it's like kind of keep on top of hydration for the week leading up to the race, and you can make a big difference there to combat the altitude. So a lot of, and I'll get into this because I think it's kind of helpful. But like, what's the best travel plan for a race at altitude? You live at sea level or at 3,000 feet, you live in a normal place. If you have the option, you could either, showing up 24 hours or less before the race is kind of the best approach, or 5 days or longer. Like those are the physiological best practices if you could choose. Because in that window of time, your body's starting to make these different adaptations, and it can be kind of hard on you. But what I will say is that none of that should be something that you really worry about. Like if you have a choice, show up, pretty much right before your race and then stay and hang out. If you're like, I want to stay and hang out in the Sierras, like stay after, or things like that. But if it just doesn't, you're going with your family, you've got, X, Y, or Z going on, when you show up isn't going to make it's not going to be the end of the world for your race either. So it's just not something worth stressing about. Like once you've got your travel plans, forget about that's it. You forget about it and move on. But your body's making adaptations when you get to altitude. That's kind of the bottom line, is that there are things happening. If you were to say go to altitude for a longer training stint, you say, I'm going to go for a whole month. One of the athletes I coach has been able to do that recently, which is great. One of the things you want to avoid is when you go to altitude, your body's doing tons of changes. So you don't want to do a bunch of really hard stuff or a bunch of volume right when you get there. Like you need a week to a week and a half to like let those things start to happen, and you have to reduce your volume, which is hard when you go to cool mountains. You want to run like 6 hours a day. So just know that like it's a risk when you go to altitude and you try to do a bunch of tough stuff. Like it's like stacking a bunch of bricks on top of you to see if you'll break. And so what can you do to deal with the altitude? Hydrating beforehand is super helpful. And really the bottom line for most of these things in the race is pacing. Like Brett's talking about the beginning of Broken Arrow. It's like super exciting and people just sprint through the village and then continue to hammer. So like that's going to amplify itself at altitude. Like those mistakes are 2 or 3-fold worse. So just chill as much as you can. These races, especially the longer ones, or really any of them, don't worry about getting caught behind people. You're like, oh man, I'm going to get a bad spot, and you can pass. Like these are not short races.
Yeah, it'll be wide open after the first half to 3/4 of a mile. Like,
Yeah.
it always seems like, oh no, I'm in 900th place. Like that's fine. In a half a mile, you still have 30 miles to go,
Or even 14, whatever it
Yeah.
is.
There's lots of time to find your rhythm.
Yeah. So like that's your magic bullet against the altitude and really most of these environmental factors.
Yeah, and with pacing, you can, first of all, nobody goes out too slow, but if you do, you can make it up later. If you go out too fast, there's not much coming back from that. It's usually pretty tough to go out the first 5 miles too fast and then recover and then feel good again.
And have your best race.
Yeah.
Right, but if you go out a little too slow, you can always make it up, and you can always hammer the second half, and it almost always pays off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a minute gained in the first half in the wrong
Yeah.
way
An
is
hour
like,
lost.
yeah, it could be 5 minutes lost each mile.
Or a DNF.
Yeah, that's definitely worst case scenarios. You have to pull the plug at some point midway out on the course, and
Yeah.
no one ever wants to have to do that.
It's really possible. Dave's right. No one ever went out too slow in the first, 3 miles of this race. It never happened, not once.
And isn't the 52K at 2 loops?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's also like a really good kind of like landmark goal, is like look at previous times, kind of how you want to place and pace like your first lap off of what other people have lapped in the past.
Yep. Yeah, the first loop will oftentimes feel suspiciously easy if
Hopefully.
you're actually pacing yourself correctly, because you finish one and guess what, you have a whole nother one.
Yeah.
And that one feels like 3.
And there's no such thing as money in the bank. It's like, oh man, I'm glad I went, that 10 minutes I got in the first half. There's no banking time in these things. Doesn't exist.
Yeah, if you try and bank time, your stomach goes bad, your quads get blown.
Yeah.
Never pays up.
What do you think, Dave? Is there any other questions that we
We did have one question. The longest long run, how many weeks out would you typically say?
Oh, interesting. We should do a blind question where you'll have to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been usually 3 to 4 weeks out from the race, has always been my longest run. A lot of my athletes are anywhere in the 2 to 4 weeks out. A lot of that's going to depend too on what your training has looked like even leading up to that longest long run. I tell a lot of my athletes, like, your training block is not defined by one long run.
Yeah.
Don't put so much emphasis on hammering out this one long run that ends up being your race. And then by the time you get the Broken Arrow, you already used it at your previous long run. So while the longest long run is definitely important,
It's only a small part of the
it's only a
overall
small
training.
part, but give yourself some time definitely to not only just, generally sometimes hitting that longest long run and then just tapering straight down to the race. Sometimes that can set up for a recipe of just kind of flat feeling legs by the time you get to the race. A lot of times getting that longest long run, recovering, but then finding that training rhythm again at a slightly reduced volume prior to that biggest long run. That can then give the body and the metabolism to kind of get back into the swing of things without the body being overly stressed. And that will just give you a better chance of having the day you want to have on race day. The long run and then taper equation it's different for a lot of people, and it's a really tough one to crack.
And the good news about that is that we're going to do another show kind of like this, probably a little bit shorter. On September 2nd, we're going to bring back most of the same crew, maybe a couple others, you never know. And we're going to talk about tapering and like, what do you do in the last 3-4 weeks going into your race? Not just the physical stuff, like we'll talk about that too, but like we're all head cases. I mean, I shouldn't call all of you out, but many of us are head cases, and we come up with all kinds of crazy stuff in the lead up to these races. So, none of us are psychologists, but we'll definitely talk in that show about, the different manias and crazy things that go through our head and how to kind of combat them when you're going, into these really big events.
Next question is favorite part of the course.
Ooh.
And
Mine's the top of the VK, top of KT22.
You scumbag.
I mean, I was going to say quick because I knew they were going to pick it if I didn't.
yeah,
Well, he's talking about the ladder, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. You're at the
Yeah.
top of the.
Not just the ladder, like the whole ridge.
Yeah.
and then like you get to look back and you see the whole lake, and like
It's
pretty
unbelievable.
spectacular.
Yeah. The course is
I think
unparalleled.
my answer would have been different, like each year you asked
Yeah.
me. Like after the most recent one, I did the 52K, and I think my favorite part of the course. Well, my favorite part of the course was finishing. It's really hard. I was ready to be done that way. But while actually on the course, on the second loop, really steep climb that just had the ropes just anchored in.
Dang it, Brett.
That was like the best I was
With the
feeling
snow,
on the
you're
course.
talking
Yeah,
about
with
the
the
snow. Yeah.
And it was just straight up. This year it'll be different. There'll actually be a trail
There will be no snow.
follow.
No
there
snow
won't
this
be.
year. It's totally different.
But
Unless
that
it's
part-
snowing on race day.
Yeah.
It might be, yeah, it might
That's
be
a
powder.
possibility. Yeah.
It could be a
And,
powder.
that's something we could definitely talk about later on, but I do not know what the weather's going to be like in October. So at this point, it's not worth really worrying about. But yeah, big climb on the second lap was really, really cool, really special.
Got another question. Do you incorporate hiking in every training session or just longer runs? I can start with that.
Yeah.
So that's a fantastic question. I did a workout about 2 weeks ago. Brett had me do running intervals. So it was a 4-minute uphill, pretty hard interval with a 2-minute uphill hike recovery.
Mm-hmm.
So it was practicing the transition from running pretty hard to hiking hard and getting a little bit more time hiking and recovering during that time. So it hit a lot of things. That's kind of a unique workout I'll do maybe 3 or 4 times during a block. I do hike definitely during my long runs, I would say probably 10 to 20% of every long run I'm hiking by time. Especially these mountain runs, sometimes it's way more. So yeah, it really does depend, but I incorporate it frequently.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
It depends on the run, right? Like,
yeah.
if it's a road run that's pretty flat, like you're probably not going to hike. And so like it is good to do those, even if you like trail running. Most people are like, I love trail running, I don't like road running. Like, well, flat running is good, even if it's only once or twice a week. I think it's worth doing. But it
I think
depends. If it's steep enough to hike, then you should hike.
Yeah, and that's a really good way to get some like kind of sneaky vert for your week is like planning a recovery run and just doing it super low intensity and like doing a hike, basically. A lot of times I'll like hike up and run down or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that's super important. Especially if you know like you said, like it's an easy run on a hilly loop. The point of it is to be easy. And if that means I'm hiking all the climbing, that's what I'm gonna do.
It's the intensity that you're going for.
Yeah, because
Conversational.
now I'm getting
Easy.
60 minutes at an easy effort, but now I'm working just slightly different set of muscles, but still at an easy effort.
Yeah.
You're still gonna get that active recovery, and it's gonna set you up for better, long run or workout, whenever the next focused session is, you'll be ready for it. I had a couple written down.
Yeah.
Poles, like there's like, it's a very split, this is like, should you use poles at Broken Arrow?
Yeah. I would say that if you do a race like Broken Arrow and you go to Europe, it's like 95% pole use.
Yeah.
At least I've never, you almost no people not using poles. It's cultural almost. It's funny
Yeah.
how it is. Yeah, on very similar courses. I would say that if you've never used poles, like your time to start using them is probably not the race, because they are a pain. Like they're not just these, you're not fluid with, if you want to take them apart and put them away for the downhill, because that is nice and you can do it, but you're not going to do it well unless you've kind of done it, quite a few times. And then just actually using them on the climb is something that like you'd want to do like once a week in training for a few months leading up if you've never done it before. But I'd say on this course, it's probably worth it if you're competent with them or have practiced some.
If you're able to practice with them, like, starting now, leading up to the race, that's going to give you the time needed for them to feel just like an extension of your arm.
Yeah.
Last thing you need is to be, descending and to just like cross your body with a pole and clothesline yourself. Going through the woods. I don't know. Maybe I did that. Maybe I did not. But I think if you can train and get ready with poles, they can help you. But if you're not gonna be able to use them until race day, they won't help you. But I think again, it's one of those things that it's like not gonna make or break your race.
And also keeping in mind, like it's definitely an investment to get a nice set of poles. Like you probably don't want to go and get the like kind of heavier ones if you want to use them for multiple years. Like keep in mind that it's probably going to take a little bit of research to like really get the gear that you want. Just like finding that perfect running shoe, it doesn't happen on the first time sometimes. And so I just purchased my first pair and it was really big. It took me like hours to like finally decide.
Yeah. I know Lefty is a sponsor of Broken Arrow. They'll be out there. In fact, if you go do like the training run, perhaps there's one on August 7th. I think they might be there. Yeah, and perhaps you get to try some out if you haven't used them, things like that.
Yeah, we can fact check that, but I thought there was demos going on at the training runs.
Yeah. And she's right. Light ones are way better. You're going to race with them. You don't want a 12-ounce pole. You want like the 3-ounce guy or the 4-ounce guy.
I want those.
You probably have them. What did you get?
I don't know. They might be. I think the lightest I could find was like 6 ounces.
Well, that was for both. Now, each.
I don't know. Maybe it was combined.
I bet it's combined. We're getting.
We got a couple more questions.
One more question. All right.
Let's do it.
First question is: are the hats legit for running?
These?
They are.
Yeah.
Oh,
these have like the mesh back.
This is our chance.
You guys talk about them. I can't talk about hats.
We just got these trails and Tarmac, BOCO, technical running truckers.
They're like best of both worlds.
Into the shop there, so they've got the structure and the paneling of a trucker hat up front, but we've got our moisture wicking material all the way through it, and then laser perforated mesh across the back, which is nice, breathable. It's not scratchy.
It's safe to say.
We got trail up top. Those are on the Trails and Tarmac Shopify shop. We've got 2 colors here.
it's safe to say it's the best hat we've done. I think that's pretty well.
I'm
That's
very excited to go run in this hat and get it all dirty.
One more
Summer
good question on
adventures.
here.
Yeah.
What does easy effort equate to in terms of a ratio 1 out of 10? And I
Yes.
actually pulled up our
You pull our
perceived effort.
spreadsheet up.
Cool.
Yeah, so I'll just run through it real quick. What we say 1 through 10 should feel like, and then we'll kind of say where maybe those efforts should be. So an effort of generally 1 to 2, super easy, conversational, like walking, feels like you could do this all day, no pain, no discomfort. So that's what a 1 to 2 should feel like. 3 to 4, breathing, somewhat more, still very easy, holding conversation, very little pain, very little effort. Feels like you could carry on for most of the day. So that's where most of your running should be in, that kind of 3 to 4 range.
3 to 4, 5.
5 to 6 is breathing is elevated, feels like you're working, still quite enjoyable, not uncomfortable, but more difficulty than 4. Can talk, but not in full sentences. So you can kind of do some short word bursts if you're running with a friend, but you don't want to carry on a whole conversation.
Yeah, that's where it's important. It's very easy during like an easy run that should be in that 3 to 4 range, where it starts to drift up into the 5 to 6 range, especially running with a buddy. You just talking elevates the heart rate. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you just gotta remember, like,
And it feels
sometimes dial it in, because it always, even 5 to 6 sometimes perceived effort wise doesn't feel too difficult, but
right.
spending too much time in that range can really wear out the body.
Especially if you're running with people, like your momentary perceived effort might be very low because it's just, you have like this camaraderie, literally it's easier to run with other people. But if you go look at like the numbers afterwards, like, that was a lot faster than I normally, run or whatever. So yeah, that's like that gray area that we like talk about. And in fact, it's probably, we could have a whole talk about just that. So we try to not skip that, but
So yeah, again, most of your running should be in that 3 to 4 range. Long run should be in there for the most part. As we get harder, 7 to 8 is hard breathing, can talk in short sentences, but don't really want to. You're not feeling comfortable. You would likely call this very hard after you're done, or hard after you're done. And then a 9 and 10 is very hard, near race effort.
blasting.
Yeah, and that's really never utilized in training. And hopefully you can do that in your race, but often you're too tired by the
Perhaps
time.
like some very short intervals or something,
Yeah.
like if you're doing like
Really specific.
2-minute hard hill efforts, like you might do this, but it's not very often.
So those are kind of the ranges if you're kind of newer to the sport and sticking that 3 to 4 range for 90% of your work.
People call those numbers perceived exertion, and it's definitely a metric that we use a lot.
Yeah, that was a great question.
One last question.
One more, all right.
That's it.
Who has the better mustache? Myself.
I
Oh,
can't
Brett,
believe-
for sure.
I can't believe this is
Brett's
even,
is, I'm looking at Brett's and
Yeah, I don't know who.
I think I would have to give him the.
I've never even been brought
God.
into this conversation before. It's such an honor to even, get my hat tossed into the ring.
Yeah, but you win. You're the champ, dude.
I've been practicing for years.
Uh,
I'd like to thank my dad.
I do give David props for like doing the clean shaven everywhere else.
Oh,
though.
thank
you. I
That's,
appreciate
yeah.
it.
David's definitely spent more time.
this takes a lot of work.
making-
Not mine takes no work. No work on my deal.
Yeah. Oh, I was sick. One last bit of like training advice
All
that I kind of forgot to touch upon. That's not even has really anything to do with like physical. Wear your sunscreen. That actually is a huge deal. Like
Absolutely.
your surface temp of your skin is cooler when you wear sunscreen, which helps with your body's ability to manage the temperatures. Then your stomach works better, your pacing is better,
Wow.
you have a better race. Like
I
that
didn't
is,
know that.
that is why sunscreen exists. Yeah, it's not just so you don't get sunburn. It's because it actually helps out with your running.
So does WADA allow sunscreen?
It's got to go through vigorous testing protocols.
Yeah. Wow, I'm gonna start wearing sunscreen.
Yeah.
I'm pretty bad at it, so I'm gonna start
That's a
doing
good
that.
one.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I think that's about it, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening. We enjoyed chatting with you. Sorry it was so high level, but we'd love to see you all at the training runs, and you have lots of opportunity to get ready for Broken Arrow. It's absolutely an incredible race, and they do an amazing job.
Yeah. The next the next event in the virtual series that Broken Arrow is putting on is July 28th. It'll be following. So we had an elite women's panel. The next one will be an elite men's panel. I'm sure they'll talk about some. Who knows what they're going to talk about? But that's July 28th, and then our next talk is September 2nd. So yeah, lots of things if you want to learn, be entertained, maybe a combination of the two. There's a bunch of opportunities Broken Arrow's putting out there. They're great. It's the best race. We love this race, and they're pushing the envelope every way they can. So yeah, we're excited to see all you guys in October at the race.
Ring the bell.
We have one here.
All right, let's sign out with the bell.
All right, get that bell.
And yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for coming on, Cam.